All right, let's talk about the Texas Longhorns coming off a dominant, even though a little bit sloppy, first ever SEC victory for this program, at least as a member of the SEC. This is, my opinion, right now, the best team in college football, and they're not resting on their laurels. They're about to pull off a massive move, even as they're lurching forward towards a national title. Great sign for Texas long term. I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, so this Texas team, they handled business, right? They had to get it done. Obviously, Arch Manning looks like an incredible superstar. Turnovers and some other dumb mistakes really hurt them, but they got the dominant victory. Everyone knows they're the best team in college football. I don't care whatever polls Sunday said, they're the most dominant team in the country. We all know it. But like all smart programs, like all great programs, they're not resting on their laurels. In fact, they're about to pull off a massive recruiting flip, turning a five-star from a clear rival into their corner here. Let's pull up this report courtesy of Athlon Sports. The Longhorns will now enjoy a bye during week 6 before facing its toughest portion of the schedule. Following the bye week, Texas will face number 19 Oklahoma in Dallas for the Red River rivalry and then host number 5 Georgia on October 19th. Texas's recent success has caught the attention of numerous highly rated recruits across the country, and a strong showing against the Sooners and Bulldogs will only boost that notion. Here's the big part. Five-star linebacker Riley Pettijohn, who verbally committed to Ohio State on July 6th, will make an unofficial visit to Austin for the Texas-Georgia game. Pettijohn is ranked the number 3 linebacker in the nation for the 2025 recruiting class and the number 8 overall prospect in Texas, according to 24/7 Sports Composite. I love this move from Texas, right? You want to bring in the big time recruits for the big time games. Some other programs, right? They wait till they play some terrible team, the Kent States of the world, to bring in these big time recruits so they know they'll get a 50-0 win. You bring them in for these big games because that's where you make the impact, and that's where you can make recruits flip to your program. Love this from Coach Sark and company. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. But first, Texas fans, in the comment section below, obviously undefeated, you're the best team in the country. I think anyone understands that, but it's been far from perfect. We've seen that a couple times over the past couple weeks. Give us the one thing you think Texas really needs to clean up the rest of the way to make sure they head into the playoff with a lot of momentum, whatever it may be. Was it turnovers, penalties, tackling, whatever it may be? Give us the one thing you think Texas needs to clean up to make sure they're heading into the second half of the season with everything squared away. Put that in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on this latest news out of Austin?
Yeah, Nick, I think this is a really interesting strategy by the Texas Longhorns and Coach Sarkisian because we've seen a little bit of precedence been set against Georgia in big time recruits. We saw Alabama most recently pretty much laid the wood to Georgia, and they had a recruit, Daryl Johnson, who shut down his recruiting after the big win against Georgia. Saw the dominance against one of the top dogs in football and college football, Georgia, a team that at the time was, they were the best team in college football. They were the team to beat because otherwise, teams had to prove Georgia. They had a lot of pedigree going into this game. Alabama had a lot of question marks. Alabama, they beat Georgia. Questions answered. Everyone's like, all right, done deal, going to Alabama. I think we're seeing something very similar out of Pettijohn. And I think it's interesting because Texas, there's a lot of, I say a lot, there's one very, very interesting game they could have invited him to. They could have took him to the Red River Shootout, Red River Rivalry, whatever you want to call it. I still like to call it Shootout personally. But they could have gone against Oklahoma. That's always a really exciting game. I think it's always a big rivalry game here. So it would have been a nice one to go to. Coming off a bye week, Quinn Ewers back. They say for right now he's the starter going forward. So there's a lot of emotion, a lot of hype going to that game. Would have been a great game to invite a top recruit to. Oklahoma, number 19 team in the country. It just all adds up. But I think we saw what happened with Alabama when they beat Georgia, because beating Oklahoma is like, okay, you're supposed to beat Oklahoma. That's one that they're a good team. It's going to be tough, but you're supposed to beat them. Beating Georgia, that's one where like, all right, questions answered about Texas. Can they hang with the big dogs in the SEC? Getting a win over Georgia, absolutely yes. So I think Georgia is now the question answered team, whether they like it or not. Alabama answered all their questions by beating Georgia. I think Texas is going to answer their questions by potentially, if they're able to beat Georgia. And having Pettijohn there is going to help them secure a top tier recruit as well. So once again, I think this was a really smart move by Texas.
So right now, I would say there are 5 programs in college football that recruit and exist on a national scale, right? There's a lot of programs that are local, right? Regional, right? They're a little section of their state or whatever. There are some programs that are dominant in their state. There's some programs that are dominant in their super region, like their cluster of states, right? But there are only like I'd say 5 right now that recruit and view themselves as national programs based on how they're playing on the football field, traditional long-term success, name pedigree, future success, all that kind of stuff. And that's Ohio State in the Big Ten. That's Georgia, Alabama. That's the USC Trojans. That's more historic, but they are still pretty good this year. And that's Texas now, of course, in the SEC, joining Alabama and Georgia. That's the way it sits currently, in my opinion. Those are the 5 national programs. That's why I love them bringing the Ohio State kid, that recruit, to the Georgia game, because you basically have a commingling, right? Of 3 national programs and 1 opportunity for Texas, right? So Texas here is doing their best to whoop up on Georgia, to beat Georgia with another national rival commit in the building. That's a statement. If you got this Ohio State commit coming in, because you better believe he's a big name guy, he's looking at Georgia too. He sits there and goes, okay, they just beat Georgia. Ohio State, I don't know how good they are, right? And this Texas squad, like they're going to be good for a very long time. Maybe I go to them. Maybe I flip to them. It's beautiful strategy. It's a smart move. It's understanding psychology of recruits. It's understanding competitive energy. And most importantly, it's understanding just your paradigm, right? The system you exist in. You look at other programs that are a much smaller scale than Texas right now. One we talk about all the time is Nebraska. They're doing a solid job in their rebuild. They understand they got to focus local and super regional only. They're not even trying to go national right now. They're focusing just on their rebuild locally and super regional. Programs like Texas, you got to understand I've got to go big. I got to go national. I am a national force. I have to treat myself like a national force. Programs like Nebraska and the rebuild, they bring in their top hopeful recruits for a game against a D1 AA team, FCS team that they can beat by 50. That's what they do, right? That's what, to be totally honest, Oklahoma will do, right? Oklahoma's a program, top 25 team, good program. Venables is a good coach. We all like Venables on the show. But the reality is they're not national right now. Different environment, different system. Sarkisian and company understand the world they're competing in. They're not competing against Oklahoma, right? They're not competing against Nebraska. They're not competing against Texas A&M, right? They're not competing even against other SEC schools that are pretty solid. I look at maybe the South Carolinas in the world. I look at the LSUs of the world. They're competing strictly on a national level. And that means those other 4 programs, USC, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. That's what their focus is. And I love that Sarkisian understands that. And he's looking to flip this kid by bringing him into a matchup against another national program.